Welcome to Innovation and Leadership. I'm Jess Larson. This is part 2 of our interview with John Havlick.
But what I learned, it got me to be humble again. I definitely checked my ego. And what I really learned is just by walking around and talking to people, the things you learned were just invaluable. And maybe you're not getting a straight answer as the word filters up and down the chain of command,
If you didn't listen to part 1, please go back and hear about his Navy career, becoming an 06 captain in the Navy SEALs, time at Development Group. And John, as we were leaving off on the last episode, we were talking about this idea of not taking the bait and how to de-escalate a situation even when somebody gets in our face for no good reason. And as I was hearing your story about kind of letting people blow out their steam and almost bringing a little fun into the conversation instead of matching it and letting it escalate of, well, I'm going to get my boss and he's going to get his boss. It made me think maybe this has something to do with the nickname Coach. Can you talk about this, or do you not want to? It's okay either way.
No, I'm good with it. The story behind the nickname is I originally came in the Navy to coach swimming at the Naval Academy, and when I was at the academy, I had never heard of I didn't even know what a Navy SEAL was, and so I quickly found out what it was, and I did about 2.5 years of coaching at the academy, and I guess I wanted to do something else. And after I heard about the SEALs, I applied for commissioning via the Officer Candidate School, and after Officer Candidate School, I went to SEAL training. And my first day at SEAL training, my leading petty officer, who was the senior enlisted guy for the class, he came up to me and he goes, "Ensign Havlick, I hear your nick. What did you do beforehand?" And I said, "Well, I was a coach at the Naval Academy." And he goes, "Yeah, Coach, we'll just keep calling you Coach. Is that okay?" And I said, "Yeah, that's fine." So that nickname, I got anointed that nickname the first day of SEAL training, and it carried me throughout my career, 31 and a half years. So nobody knows my name, and a very few people know my last name. They just kind of know Coach, So I take that as very honorable, and I was okay with it.
That's awesome. So, for anybody who missed episode 1, can you give us the name of the book and the premise of it one more time that's coming out?
Yeah, it's called The Leadership Killer: Reclaiming Humility in an Age of Arrogance. And the gist behind the book is we write about hubris, or big ego, as the single most lethal leadership flaw. And we offer tips and suggestions and stories, real life stories on hubris and how it hurts some people. And we try to offer strategies and tips on how to check your ego and control your ego and make sure you don't turn into a bad leader or an abusive leader.
Yeah. Do you want to tell us maybe one of your favorite stories that's in the book?
I think the biggest leadership thing I often said was when I had my first overseas tour at a special boat unit in Panama, and I was the executive officer, so I was the number 2 guy below the commanding officer, and so I was in charge of the day-to-day operations of the unit. And I kept hearing people say that leadership didn't know what was going on around the command, and I would hear that through the grapevine or hear the other sailors mention that. And so what I made myself do was I would every Friday we had this thing called a field day, and it was just a command cleanup before the weekend. And after the cleanup, I would walk around and I'd check for cleanliness and make sure it was done correctly. But I used that time. I just made sure on the peripheral that it was clean, but I used that time to meet my people and learn their first names, and which is hard for me because I'm terrible at names. And so learning, and it's easy to get away in the military because there's usually a rank associated and last name, and the last name is on a name tag on your uniform. So it doesn't matter if you know the person or not. You can just call them by their name and rank and get away with it. But I wanted to learn the first names of everybody in my command, and that's like 200 plus people. And so, and for SEALs, normally associated with small units of maybe 16 to 40 people. 200's a big deal. So for about 9 months it took me to do it, and I use at the 9 month mark. The Navy changes uniforms twice a year, so um, we were having a uniform inspection, haircut uniform inspection, and I made it a point to walk around each member of my command, shake their hand, and call them by their first name. And I remembered everybody but one person, and I was standing in front of this one sailor, and I was totally embarrassed because I couldn't remember his first name. And he goes, "That's okay, sir. My first name is so and so, and that's because I haven't been in trouble and been in your office, so you don't know my name." And I kind of laughed at that, and everybody around started laughing. And it turned out that this one sailor, out of everybody out of this 200, turned out to be my sailor of the year. So he was my best sailor, and then the one person I couldn't remember first name was my sailor of the year. So pretty funny story, at least to me. But I think what I learned by learning everybody's first name is I learned more about them. Uh, they became very, I learned an awful lot about the command. And so since my sailors were on the deck plate doing the work, they knew the command climate, they knew the problems that I normally didn't get up to the headquarters. And so I use it as a time just to learn about people and learn about my unit and what I could do right, what I was doing right, what we were doing wrong, and how could we do better. So,
it's interesting, kind of how much is packed into that for the rest of us in different kinds of organizations, because, in our own versions of the head shed, wherever we work, there can be such temptation to just rely on the reports that come in and just trust that, your senior leadership is meeting well with the mid-level leadership, and that those supervisors are out there talking to the associates, the frontline staff, right? And yet,
right.
doesn't it go so far when, the boss's boss or the boss's boss's boss comes down and learns your first name when they don't have to? Isn't that such a hearts and minds thing we can do in our own organizations?
Well, I think that's the biggest. After I got out and I came back in, I was very grateful to be back in. And, the story of kind of my rise and fall, it takes up 2 chapters of the book. I'm not going to tell you about it. You can buy it and read about it. But what I learned, it got me to be humble again. Yeah, I definitely checked my ego. And what I really learned is just by walking around and talking to people, the things you learned were just invaluable. And maybe you're not getting a straight answer as the word filters up and down the chain of command, and so when I talked to the people on the deck plates, I got ground truth on what was going on around the command, what was going right, what was wrong, especially if folks were having trouble, especially overseas. There were a lot of pressures on everybody and families, individuals that are not used to being overseas. And so if people were having problems or families were having problems, you could kind of get a heads up and start addressing it and trying to fix it or, alleviate the problems. And so I found the best thing I could ever do was I had to force myself to push myself away from the desk and just get out and walk around and talk to people and shake their hand, look them in the eye. Don't take a lot of time, but enough that, you're relating to them one-on-one. And I think it's so invaluable to leaders that if they have that opportunity to do that, they'll really get more. They'll get more out of the people that work for them, and because the people that work for them know that you care. And I think by learning their first name, especially in the military, it was invaluable to me. So I tried to do it every subsequent tour that I was assigned to.
It is definitely one thing I admire about your community is, having worked with a number of different conventional units across DoD, as well as in the Special Operations Forces community. I don't know if you feel this way, but in some ways I feel like um, the more elite the unit, the more there is a almost a flipping of the leadership triangle of like instead of um, I just feel like there's almost more of like a servant leader approach sometimes of um, where you see commanders and individuals willing to train their people better so that they can trust the boots on the ground, and then they do trust the boots on the ground more, and instead of all decisions being had to send back to headquarters to let us know what the next move is, there becomes more and more faith in those frontline folks who then start living up to the faith of making wise decisions in high intensity situations. Do you see it that way as well, or do you see it differently?
I think the beauty of the SEALs that and what I really loved was, and it started in training, and as your class whittled down from a large number, you go through Hell Week. The guys drop out or get hurt and get rolled back, and we started with about 112 guys in the first day of training, and we graduated 22. 6 months later, 18 from the original class. And so when you whittle down to that small number and you're going through everything you're doing every day, the intensity, and um, you become very familiar with the guys, because really SEAL training is the only training where officers and enlisted go through together. And so if you try to maintain that rank structure, it's not well received, especially when you need something done. And that's what I kind of felt about the SEALs was great. And in Special Forces is because of the nature of the work and the small unit cohesion that sometimes, although the rank structure is respected and everybody knows you're an officer and you make the ultimate final decision, what I think the beauty is enlisted and officers interact and they share ideas and they communicate, because really the success of the mission relies so much on the guys putting, the work, doing all the hard work. When somebody packed, a enlisted guy packed my parachute, I got to rely on him to make sure he packs my parachute properly, and so there's a bond, and there's just a natural respect that you've gone through all this training, and they're super smart. They're often smarter than you are. And if you don't take advantage of what they can offer to you, you're foolish. And so that's what I really liked about the SEALs, the close-knit cohesion of the units and the interaction with the guys.
So, um, if you had advice for other leaders out there who are realizing, man, I come from an organization where, management are the ones who think and frontline staff are the ones who do, and we really separate that. But I want to become more of an organization where, we do trust the ground truth, and we do, everybody gets to bring their brain to work. It's not the thinkers and the doers. If they want to start building new habits, do you have advice for folks who want to, they want to maybe embrace that more?
Yeah, we offer, like I said, throughout the book, we offer tips on how to be a more effective, humble leader. And I think three things really at least help me towards mission accomplishment, better unit interaction was, as a leader, you can't be afraid to ask questions, and because you don't know everything. And if you try to lead with that, you're going to end up in mission failure. So, it's okay to ask questions and show people that you don't know everything, because it makes you human. And people respond to that. They want to help. Ultimately they have a vested interest in the success of the organization or the command, and they want to participate. They want to help out. So it's okay as a leader to ask questions. Second thing we say is, when I mentioned my time in Panama, is I took time to go down and meet my people, and taking time. Normally, folks in the higher levels in the C ring, their time is pretty compressed with meetings and travel and things like that. And when the people see that they take that time to come down and meet them and talk with them, I think it sends a great message how much the leadership cares for those individuals. And then the last thing is, say thank you, and say it a lot, and be sincere when you offer it, because sometimes leaders kind of just do the phony, oh, thank you, and all that. But I think when you say thank you sincerely and do it often, that people like that. They like to know that they've done a good job and be rewarded for it, with even with a simple thank you, and you get a lot more out of your people. So those are the 3 tips that I would offer.
That third one, it sounds so simple, yet, if you read some of the research out there, at least in America, corporate America, um, we like really don't have great stats as leaders when it comes to that. Like if we were a baseball card, we don't have good stats. Like
Right.
the research says that we definitely get on people's case when they make a mistake. Um, but when it comes to them doing something right, it's almost like well, yeah, that's their job, you
Yeah.
know? Um, can you talk about just any flavor to that, or somebody who said thank you to you on your career, somebody that you look up to that actually you felt the genuine appreciation from one of your leaders?
Um,
Or
no,
go ahead.
there's been just a couple instances. I don't try to. I say you want to. I guess what the last point about saying thank you is, you don't want to do it all the time because then it kind of becomes phony. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But there are certain right times when public acknowledgement of a good job is vitally important. And so the right times. Like in the military, there's you may say guys went on a good deployment and you welcome them back and say thank you for the time, and or you say thank you to the families when you have a family day, that because when the guys leave and go overseas, they're stuck back here in the States taking care of all the problems, and so when you get those opportunities to publicly thank people for their support and making, because ultimately they make you look good or they can make you look bad too. So I think there's a right time to say thank you and do it sincerely. Um, I don't remember any real leaders that thanked me for anything I did. I do remember a uh, couple guys throughout my career that I worked for that were junior to me, and I kind of inspired them to either go into the SEALs or not quit, or try something that wasn't um, comfortable, that they hadn't been comfortable with, and it was clearly. And I've several times that I've spoken since I've gotten out, and I do these corporate presentations, I've gotten a lot of positive feedback afterwards, even maybe a year or two down the line, where saying, hey, I remember you bringing this up, your point, and I use this and I use it every day. And that's kind of very satisfying, that, sometimes totally out of the blue, that you see somebody and they thank you for, what you said or what you offered up to them. So
Yeah. Well, can you tell us just a little bit about this story off your website about I think it's Tuesday night of Hell Week, and you went up to your proctor and you're thinking about ringing the bell and said something about you're not sure you're cut out for the SEAL stuff, and what your proctor responded back to you.
yeah, well, I mean, you're just going to steal my 30-second decision story that I get paid big money for. But but what the gist was, yeah, it was Tuesday night. We hadn't been asleep yet, and we'd been up about 48 hours, and we had just spent about 8 hours in a mud pit just doing things, and we were going to our first scheduled um, sleep period, and throughout Hell Week, um, you you get about, they say, about 4 hours of sleep throughout the week, and it's usually in like 15-minute increments. But so we were going towards our first one, and I remember just kind of relooking what I was doing this for. That the kind of the reality of uh, SEAL training hit me square in the face. And I started doubting myself and doubting my desire to continue. And so I mentioned to another classmate of mine in my boat crew that I was thinking of quitting. And And we went to our, excuse me, and we went to our little layup where we were going to sleep. And I had just fallen asleep. And I hear this, Ensign Havlick, get over here. And I was like, who the hell is waking me up now? I was kind of upset because I hadn't slept in 48 hours, and now this guy wants to talk to me. So it was my proctor, and the proctor is another SEAL instructor who is kind of the mediator between the training staff and your class. And so he uh, he was standing in front of the fire, and he goes, Ensign Havlick, I hear you want to quit. And I said, well, I'm thinking about it, and we called this guy Instructor Psycho because his eyes would light up, and this was about 2:30 in the morning. I remember this dark and just the fire in the background, and I swear to God, he got right in my face, and his eyes just lit up, and I could just feel him burning down to my soul, And he said, Ensign Havlick, you're an officer. Stop thinking about yourself and start thinking about your men. And he goes, you don't want to quit. And he says, just start thinking about your men. And I'm standing there, and I started mumbling something, and he just told me to shut up. And he said, and then he said, I'm going to go over here to the fire. I'm going to get a cup of coffee. And when I come back, I want your decision. And he's walking away. He turns around, and he says, but don't make a decision in 30 seconds. Said you'll regret the rest of your life. And he went and got his coffee, and he came back, and he said, what's your decision? And I said, I'm in. I'm ready to go back. And he goes, okay, let's never talk about this again. And we never did. And it changed my whole attitude. And it was vitally important. It was a good attitude adjustment for me, because then as an officer, you really have to start thinking about your men, making sure they're okay, doing everything they can, making sure they're good to go instead of yourself. And so that was a pretty important moment for me, and probably the best decision I've ever made in my life.
You know what I kind of love about that story is so often we hear about, somebody taking the time to really care about us and connect with us at a human level, learn our first name, these kind of humble leader type of things, servant leader type of things. And there can be the impression that those all need to be like soft interactions, and there one of I don't know, I guess what's interesting there is, he's telling you to shut up, he's getting in your face, and yet it's not for him, it's not out of anger, it's what he felt like the right thing for you was. And I think sometimes we can limit ourselves in thinking what it means to take care of people, that it all is, puppies and roses. And
Right.
The right thing for people is the right thing for people. It doesn't necessarily have to come with a hug, right?
Well, I think, there were certainly no hugs involved in this incident, but well, I think what was important about the whole thing, and I didn't really think about this till years later, actually, was Hell Week is the fourth week of training, and so you're still very new, still very fresh, and guys are dropping all the time and quitting, and most of your instructors are enlisted personnel, and when an officer quits, they work hard. Officers really hard in training, and because the expectation is you're going to be a leader, and you may work with these guys later on down the road in the teams. And so if somebody wants to quit, then usually the standard operating procedure is that guys just quit and they let them do it. And when I think back on the whole incident, I mean, it clearly, this guy saw something in me that I didn't see, that would be beneficial in the long run into the SEALs. And he kind of gave me a second chance, to kind of rethink what I was doing, and hey, maybe put a little maybe in confidence back into myself, that I was, having some self-doubts, that, hey, I have the traits, I have the qualities that the SEALs are looking for. And then just, if you start thinking about your men, all your pain and all your aggravation and your cold and everything else will go away, and you'll make it. And I think that was very effective, because they could have easily just let me quit. So, yeah. So I think it was a great learning experience for me. Like I said, a great opportunity these guys don't normally do, and probably the best decision I ever made in my life.
Well, to me, I look at it, as a former CEO of a private equity fund, right? We're always looking for efficiencies and what's the maximum output for the input you put in, right? And
Right.
you think about him willing to kind of, you know, like take that extra time and take that extra attention. And our country got another 3 decades of service from you, who is obviously someone who could do it. I mean, you made it all the way into development group, right?
Right. Right.
And
Right.
and you think about the benefit to the teams, to our military, to our entire country, of somebody with your skill set that we, or at least potential at that point, right? That was, right there on the fence, and essentially like the benefit to the rest of us of 3 decades of your service by him taking that extra time at a personal level with you, right?
Yeah, and especially like I said, his personality. He was, coming from him. Uh, like I said, I was only 4 weeks into the whole training thing, and Hell Week starts becoming a blur. So he probably caught me at the right moment, when I was still functional and still had some mental aptitude going. But for that individual to take that time to kind of give me the opportunity to rethink um, my future, yeah, I'm always very grateful to him, and for and then all the opportunities that opened up by finishing SEAL training and going on and making a career of it. It's been the best thing I have ever done. So I'm very grateful to that individual for giving me that opportunity.
It's great. Well, listen, besides people coming to coachhavlick.com, which is Havlik,
Right.
um, tell us about, can they pre-register for the book somewhere? Should they just watch for it on Amazon? What's people who want to get access to the book?
Well, you can go on the website www.leadershipkiller.com, and the book is available for pre-order, both via uh, Kindle or hard copy if you want to get it. The official release date is 30 October, so can't get the book just yet, but I highly encourage it. I think it's a book um, that's relevant for today. It talks about a topic that needs to be addressed, and I think it's a good read for leaders at all levels, whether you're beginning or you're super successful, and maybe you use it as a tool to kind of rethink what you're doing, and are you doing the right stuff, or maybe I need to stop doing this, go to another area. So leadershipkiller.com, and 30 October. And I encourage everyone to, of course, buy the book, or the iPad, or the ebook, and really excited about the book release and what it has to offer, because it's not a preachy book. It comes from real life stories, my own, which I've never shared with anyone before, and of what I did right and what I did wrong, and how my hubris got in my way, and how I had to recover, and what I learned from it. So if anything, it's good. I offer that up as a lesson learned to anybody who wants to be a leader. So
Love it. Well, thanks for coming on the show.
all right, Jess, thanks very much. I appreciate it, and hopefully I did a good job.
Yeah, it was great.